Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? Happy New Year. I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Your liberty-loving Latino amigo. Happy to be here with you this Thursday night. We're live, we're national. Our phone number, if you want to join us, 833-482-5337, 833-4 Valdez. Of course, that is Valdez with an S, and you can follow me on all of the social media at that handle. And check this out. So much to discuss, right? I've been off the air for a little bit because of Christmas and New Year's. And I come back and we have a jihad on America. Unbelievable. Now, of course, it's not the first time we've been attacked, but this is probably the third largest terror attack in recent history. And we know very little about it. Now, of course, I know we live in this microwave generation where we want to know everything and we want to know it yesterday, quick, fast, and in a hurry, right? But the reality is sometimes these things take time, and sometimes they're keeping us in the dark, right? Sometimes these things are real, and sometimes they're fake, phony, and fraud. Now, I'm not saying that what happened didn't happen. I'm just saying I don't know if we're getting all of the story the way it should be. So we're going to discuss these attacks, right? There was an attack on the Trump Hotel in Vegas. A Tesla Cybertruck went and parked right in front of the double doors main entrance. Blew it up. The guy set off a bomb. They say the guy's a former Special Forces operator from the United States Army. Then you've got a similar but different incident. Another United States Army person, both from Fort Bragg, while they say there's no connection between the two. He goes and starts running people over in a huge pickup truck with an ISIS flag. And the FBI says this is this is not a terrorist attack, while the mayor's saying it is. And I've got a clip of that. It's pretty quick, so I'm going to play it for you right here. Listen to the mayor of New Orleans at the press conference.
First of all, we do know that the city of New Orleans was impacted by a terrorist attack. It's all still under investigation. You'll hear more after me. However, I have been in direct contact with the White House, with Governor Landry, and, of course, a unified command who is present here.
All right, so there you go. You have the mayor telling it exactly like it is. And then you have the FBI spokesperson at that time was a woman named Duncan. Special agent, or assistant director Duncan. And here's what she had to say moments later.
This is not a terrorist event. What it is right now is their improvised explosive devices that was found. And we are working on confirming if it's a viable device or not.
So you have Mayor LaToya Cantrell, who in most situations, right, it's the politicians that are careful about what they say, but not in this case, right? In this case, Mayor LaToya Cantrell, she says, quite frankly, we just experienced a terrorist attack. And then you've got this FBI person, Duncan, comes out and says this was not a terrorist attack. Now, of course, they went and corrected the record a little while after that and brought out another guy, Special Assistant, Mr. Rhea. Bottom line here is the FBI really doesn't seem to have a handle on what's going on. When you've got attacks, we've seen these attacks before. They are happening all over the world. How could you sit there and say with such certitude, right? This is not a terror event. How do you know? How do you know, Miss Duncan? That's my question. I mean, we've seen a similar, again, just when I say similar, I mean a vehicular attack. Brooklyn, New York. I think it was today. Jewish mom and her child run over. New Zealand. 2 police officers, 1 died. Run over. This seems to be a trend. Again, maybe this is how New Year's is celebrated in different parts of the world. I don't think so. So clearly, there's this jihad going on. Now, I understand somebody said, come on, Rich, you're jumping to conclusions here. That's being hyperbolic. No, I'm giving you my opinion on what I see, right? I'm from this old school, even though I'm a young guy. I'm from this old school where they say if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck, guess what? It's a duck, quack, quack. This is just the beginning, right, of, I think, people realizing how much ineptitude exists within the Bureau. And of course, along with the ineptitude, the other side of that coin is conspiracy and the ability to hide things, right, to conceal things. Because they're just as good at concealing whatever they want to conceal. So we're going to dig into the FBI with a former FBI agent who's going to keep it real. He wrote a book criticizing the FBI, and we're going to get into that. I also want to get into what's going on with the ISIS. I thought we defeated ISIS. Is ISIS back? The return of ISIS because of Joel Baboso Biden? Come on. I mean, it's like you can't make this stuff up. Things go, in Spanish, there's a saying, vamos de Guatemala a Guatapeor. We're going from Guatemala to Guata worse, which means from Guata bad to Guata worse. Anyway, sounds better in Spanish. The point is, I can't wait for January 20th to come any quicker, right? This is a tough situation to be in. Now, secondly, I want to get into this discussion on what's happening internationally. Thirdly, I want to get into some discussion on President Jimmy Carter and a little bit of reflection on the deep state as well, because Carter died at 100 years old over, just a couple of days ago. And, I think we should give him his due and talk about, and I don't mean give him his due and give him like a 21-gun salute, but I mean, talk about him, talk about, how they came up with that way to measure how bad the economy was during his administration. And did Biden beat him? My vote is yes, he likely did. And I also want to talk about how DEI contributed to the lack of awareness of the ISIS threat. Listening to some video footage over the weekend, and or I should say over the holiday. And there is a very active jihadist movement in Canada. That's right here in North America. That's right to our northern border. And who's to say that that's not alive and well here? Not you or me, because obviously we're seeing, what's going on in the news. And, of course, I just want to remind you about the show, right? We have the final segment of the program. We call it Open Phones Across America. Now, that's not something I came up with. That's something that the great Larry King came up with and Jim Bohannon carried on for decades. And, of course, you and I are going to do that tonight. The phone number for that, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. So stick with me. We've got some big topics, some really big guests, and some of the best listeners in America. That's you. And I'm looking forward to speaking with you guys in just in a few minutes. That being said, I want to take a quick pause right here, come right back, and jump into this. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
We had this event started at about 3:15. It did involve a man driving a pickup truck down Bourbon Street at a very fast pace, and it was very intentional behavior. This man was trying to run over as many people as he possibly could. It was not a DUI situation. This is a more complex and more serious based on the information we have right now. What I also can tell you is that this man, this perpetrator, he fired on our officers from his vehicle when he crashed his vehicle. 2 of our officers have been shot. They are stable, and we will give you an update on them. I have yet been able to go to the hospital. I will be leaving here for us to go visit our officers. We have called in every officer that we have. We have so much appreciated our partnerships who have also offered us staff. Last night, we had over 300 officers out here. And because of the intentional mindset of this perpetrator who went around our barricades in order to conduct this, he was hell-bent on creating the carnage and the damage that he did.
That, of course, is Superintendent of Police Kirkpatrick from the New Orleans, Louisiana Police Department, talking about this horrific attack that occurred on New Year's. And I want to get into this because she's talking about this suspect. And the suspect has been identified as, let me see if I can pronounce this appropriately, Shamsuddin Jabbar. And this guy, United States Army veteran, he served from March of 2007 to January of 2015 in the United States Army. He did HR. He was a technology specialist. This guy's earned 23 ribbons and badges, including the Army Good Conduct Medal, Army Achievement Medal, the Army Commendation Medal. He was also bestowed a Global War on Terrorism Service Medal. Irony. Now the FBI says he's committed an act of domestic terrorism, which at first they were saying was not terrorism. So I want to get into this with the author of the book, The Fall of the FBI, How a Once Great Agency Became a Threat to Democracy. Former FBI agent Tom Baker, welcome back, sir.
Great to be with you again, Rich.
You bet. Happy New Year. Now, not so happy for some people, but I want to get into this because the first thing I think most Americans saw, yesterday morning, I would say, was the reaction of the mayor of Louisiana, of New Orleans, saying that they had endured a terrorist attack. And then moments later, Mayor Cantrell says this, and she is then contradicted by the FBI spokesperson, Ms. Duncan, who clearly says this is not a terror threat. We're tracking down IEDs, things that never blew up, and there was no evacuations that took place. So I'm led to believe that this is I don't know. It seems like it's fake, phony, and fraud to me. Somebody dropped the ball, and there was a massive failure here. What say you?
Well, there were failures apparently, but what's of most concern to me, and this ASAC in New Orleans is emblematic of it and is an outstanding example of it. It's embarrassing. It's ridiculous to say that this was not a terrorist incident so early on, even if it was not, even if it turned out not to be, to declare definitively that it was not when the investigation had just begun, the incident had just happened, and then this person tried to justify what she was saying. She's saying we're investigating an improvised explosive device, an IED. Well, the IED is how the terrorist act was carried out. Terrorist acts can take many forms. They can be bombings. They can be car bombings or truck bombings, as this one was close to that. They can be shootings. They can be assassinations. The violence takes many forms, but that's what terrorism is. And that you have somebody standing up there, it just shows all the FBI's current problems out for everybody else, how the culture has gone off track with the woke culture and particularly the DEI mentality. You have a woman there with a ring in her nose declaring this was not terrorism. What have we become? This was embarrassing.
Yeah, Agent Baker, I get where you're coming from. Listen, I'm not opposed to a nose ring. I just think she should at least know what she's talking about if she's going to get up there and try and look cute. Now, one of her counterparts, another FBI spokesman, he comes out and he says that this terror suspect, Mr. Jabbar, he'd been planning this attack for several days, and they likely knew about it. Listen to this.
At this point, investigators believe Jabbar picked up the rented F-150 in Houston, Texas on December 30th. He then drove from Houston to New Orleans on the evening of the 31st, and he posted several videos to an online platform proclaiming his support for ISIS. There were 5 videos posted on Jabbar's Facebook account, which are time-stamped beginning at 1:29 a.m., and the last at 3:02 a.m. In the first video, Jabbar explains he originally planned to harm his family and friends, but was concerned the news headlines would not focus on the, quote, war between the believers and the disbelievers, end quote. Additionally, he stated he had joined ISIS before this summer. He also provided a will and testament.
So, Agent Tom Baker, when you hear this, it makes you think, if we had any indication, and you would imagine, I would think, right, if you have a barricade, and I don't want to be too critical because, the cops, in my opinion, were heroic. They heard gunshots, they saw what happened, they ran toward it in a big group, and God bless them for doing that. But it seems to me, if you have any indication that you may be a target, that you need to harden these targets and maybe use more than just one police car to block the street, or am I being presumptuous?
Well, frankly, Rich, you're probably right. But I don't know the particulars of what the state and local police had to face there and how much of this information had filtered down to them in a timely manner. I'm more concerned about, well, first of all, we all should be concerned about there was a terrorist act and a lot of innocent people were killed, and that's a tragedy, and we all acknowledge that. But looking at the big picture of the FBI, which I think is why you've enlisted me to discuss this, it shows a lot of things that are wrong, that have gone wrong under Mueller and Comey, and brought us to the point we're at. One is the reluctance, even after they decide that it's a terrorist incident, to call it what it is. This was radical Islamic terrorism. This individual, he may have been an American citizen, he may have been a U.S. Army veteran, but he was motivated by radical Islamic terrorism to carry out jihad, to kill the infidels, which include you and me, and those poor innocent people in New Orleans. And that's what it's all about. And don't let anybody, as even President Biden now tried to emphasize, that this guy was a U.S. citizen. That's distraction.
Yeah, that's distraction. That's laying cover. Hey, Agent Baker, can you stick around for another few minutes? I got to take a quick pause here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. All right, amigos, we're coming right back. We're going to continue this discussion with Agent Tom Baker, the author of the Kick Butt book, The Fall of the FBI. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back, familia. We continue our conversation with former FBI Special Agent Tom Baker. He's the author of the book, The Fall of the FBI, How a Once Great Agency Became a Threat to Democracy. And we're seeing how diversity, equity, and inclusion has really led to the focus being taken off of the things that matter, right? Clearly, people are not paying attention to the jihadist threat because they don't want to offend or assume or whatever and whatnot. Looking at a quick piece in the Daily Caller, and the New Orleans Police Department, the city's FBI field office, they're staunch advocates for DEI. And it's those same agencies that are now investigating the terrorist attack that killed these 14 or 15 people yesterday. So what happens now? They're trying to investigate this thing while they've aggressively promoted diversity initiatives on social media and through their recruitment. And something that they said in a press release just earlier last year, they have a diversity agent recruitment event to aid in their search for applicants with diverse backgrounds, skills, opinions, and perspectives. That means not enough people want to work there, right? I guess that's what that means. And it's interesting when you put this above everything else, when you want to change the look of something more than you want to change the why something is important, you're going to destroy that something. And that's just how it is. All right, it doesn't matter if you want to, change the landscape of professional football, professional boxing, professional broadcasting, you name it, whatever it is. It doesn't matter. You can't just start throwing people in there and saying, oh, I like the way they look. It's got to be, I like the way they do the job, right? They're the best person for the job. And that goes without saying. But anyway, I want to continue, right? I want you to listen to this FBI agent delivering some updates in a press conference and letting us know that the priority here is to only identify a suspect as a terrorist or as a part of an act of terrorism, if they qualify for that. Listen to this.
Right now, our number one goal is to ensure that we have the proper identification of the subject involved in this incident. Following that, our second objective is to determine whether this was an act of terrorism or not. I know everybody's interested in that word and trying to see if we can say, hey, this is a terrorist attack. That is our goal, and that's what we're trying to do. We have a ton of resources dedicated to this right now, and again, we're doing it with our partners. We're doing it together, jointly, and we'll continue to do so until we figure out exactly what's going on. I think most importantly, as the sheriff already mentioned, we believe this is an isolated incident.
Well, they think it's isolated, and it very well may be. But like I said, other people are getting run over in different parts of the world, and I don't think they necessarily had an ISIS flag, but this guy did. So it's interesting. These photos that were taken of the ISIS flag were taken, I don't know, less than 1 hour after the guy was, dragged out of the car after the cops shot him and they did CPR. I've seen all these videos, right? They're all over Twitter. People that were up in buildings were videotaping this stuff. It was all over Twitter, also known as X. And if I saw it on X, does the FBI not have Twitter? I thought they worked at Twitter. I thought they were. Maybe Elon Musk fired them all when he brought in the sync that time. I don't know. But I'll say this. These guys look like clowns to the average American, I think. That's my opinion. But then they come out and they say this, that this actually was an act of terrorism. Check this out.
Let me be very clear about this point. This was an act of terrorism. It was premeditated and an evil act. Posted several videos to an online platform proclaiming his support for ISIS. In the first video, Jabbar explains he originally planned to harm his family and friends, but was concerned the news headlines would not focus on the, quote, war between the believers and the disbelievers, end quote.
This guy wanted to kill his family and friends and opted to kill a bunch of strangers because it wouldn't get the right attention. What a whack job. Let's go back to Agent Baker, who's been patiently standing by, listening to all of this. Agent Baker, how do you react to this stuff?
Well, Rich, as a former FBI agent, I spent 33 years of my life with the FBI, and since my retirement, I've been closely engaged with them as a consultant and otherwise. I find this incredibly embarrassing and ridiculous. And part of it does go to what you started to speak about before, the emphasis on DEI. In the FBI and in other federal agencies, particularly in the FBI, that started under Comey and continued under Wray. DEI was given pride of place in the FBI value system. And as part of their enlarging the headquarters bureaucracy, they've actually now increased it to such an extent that they've established a separate division an Office of Diversity and Inclusion, which is headed by an assistant director to promote diversity. And they, in their value system, they've named diversity as a core value of the FBI. Now, as that happened, DEI taking precedent, it lowered all sorts of standards. And former Attorney General Bill Barr, who is a friend of the FBI and worked closely with the FBI in both his turns as Attorney General, he's pointed this out. It lowered standards across the board in recruiting, training, and promotion. And that's something that has to be addressed by the new director. Government-wide, hopefully the Trump administration will throw DEI out the window, but the FBI has to throw it out the window. Kash Patel has to look at that and throw that out the window because it's just phoniness. And the other phony issue that you also commented on is the declining to call this form of terrorism, radical Islam, what it is. They go to great extents, and they even when they use the word radicalized, they never say what the person was radicalized into or about.
Yeah. And, this, for me, Agent Tom Baker, this is a big issue because they're lying to the American people. And moreover, people are literally at risk, right? I mean, this is not like this is the 1960s Weather Underground where they're bombing empty buildings. And not that I'm condoning that behavior, but these people are going after people. They're trying to hurt people. They're trying to kill people. And here we have our largest investigatory body, the FBI, the gold standard in federal law enforcement. All of a sudden, now we can't trust them anymore. And it's not like it just happened today. It's been happening for quite a while. And today and yesterday, I think, are just adding to that.
It's been happening under particularly under Mueller and Comey, and now it's been allowed to continue under Wray. And it's all part of a cultural change, and the culture has to be reversed. It has to get back to the working within the guidelines of the Constitution as a law enforcement agency, and not looking at our fellow Americans, which is the priority that's been put on things lately, as potential terrorists. And this act was not an act of domestic terrorism, even though it was committed by a U.S. citizen. That's a technicality. It was committed by an Islamist, and Islam is part of international terrorism. And that's the challenge that has to be addressed. And to address that properly, the FBI has to change their culture. And I hope to God that Kash Patel gets enough help and enough advisors around him that he can do it. It can be done, but it's a very difficult job, changing culture.
Yeah, I agree. It's a hard job, and I'm glad to see that you're supportive of Kash Patel because I think this is definitely the right guy for the job. Now, switching gears, I want you to hear from the Las Vegas police and the sheriff discussing exactly what happened with this vehicle that was parked outside of the Trump hotel building. Just another bizarre action. Listen to this.
Now, further complicating this identification of this individual, we also discovered through the coroner's office that the individual had sustained a gunshot wound to the head prior to the detonation of the vehicle. One of the handguns was found at his feet inside of the vehicle.
So now this is the story of another U.S. Army Green Beret special operator who also served at Fort Bragg, just like Mr. Jabbar, terrorist Jabbar, and I don't know anything about the connection between those two things, but I would suspect that there likely is one in some way, shape, or form, whether it's morale or something more sinister. And here we have this incident. He puts himself in a Tesla SUV Cybertruck electric vehicle and blows it to smithereens, but yet it doesn't really affect the building. It just blows him up, like as they say, beyond recognition. But they were able to recover a passport that didn't burn and something in his wallet that also didn't burn that identified him and identified that he was shot in the head. I don't know the angle of the shot. I don't know any of that stuff. I don't know if he did it and that somebody shot him in the head. I don't know anything. But this thing, to me, it stinks to high heaven. This doesn't sound official. Am I being too cynical?
Well, people like yourself and many others are cynical today because we have been misled by our government. But I'm willing to give the sheriff a lot of leeway, and he's trying to puzzle things out. A lot of the evidence has been destroyed in the process. I'm curious forensically how they can. The statement was made he shot himself before he blew the car up or after he blew the car up. How they know what the sequence is that happened in. That's a point of interest for me. But once again, that's not the main thing here. His attack did not go off the way he intended. A part of that is the way the Tesla was made. Thank God it didn't. Thank God nobody else was killed other than the perpetrator in that incident. But we do have an underlying problem here with federal law enforcement. Fortunately, I think we still have a pretty good system with most of our state and local police, although even in New Orleans, we see that the police chief that was brought in there, she's someone that parted company under other circumstances in her previous jobs in other cities, and she's a great advocate of DEI. So that problem is popping up everywhere.
It sure is. And Agent Baker, I want to thank you for being with us. Very informative conversation. I love to have our conversations where we really get into the nitty-gritty of this stuff. Please let everybody know where they can get a copy of your book.
Well, most people get my book, The Fall of the FBI, on Amazon. That's where most people do their book shopping now. It's also available on Barnes & Noble online and at other outlets. But Amazon or Barnes & Noble online, you go there, you can get the book, and I appreciate people doing that. Thank you very much, Rich.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Folks, we're on with Thomas J. Baker. He's a former FBI agent and the author of The Fall of the FBI, How a Once Great Agency Became a Threat to Democracy. And straight ahead, we're live again. We're live and national. We're going to get to your calls. The phone number for that, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Tom Baker, I want to thank you for being here, sir. You are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot, sir.
Thank you, Rich, and have a good evening, and have a happy new year. Bye.
You bet. God bless.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We continue our conversation with you, the American people. It's open phones across America. Let's go to Jim, Naperville, Illinois, streaming the show on WMAL. Jim, go for it. You're on with Rich Valdez.
Hey, I'll tell you what, Rich. You know, it was so insidious about this driver in New Orleans is that he used an electric vehicle that weighs a ton, like 1,500
in Vegas,
pounds
yeah,
more than a normal F-150, and he flattened those poor people. And
in New Orleans, got it.
They couldn't hear it coming. You know, the quietness of an electric vehicle. You know. It's just, you know, they couldn't hear the sounds of a normal
the engine roaring,
gas engine accelerating. You know what I'm saying?
Wow. Yeah, you know, I wasn't even aware of that. That's news to me. Thanks for bringing that up. And you know what to me, it's more to the fact that this was truly premeditated. It wasn't a last ditch effort. It wasn't, you know, let me go there and shoot the people. I mean, this guy did everything. He ran over whoever he could run over. He got out, started shooting at the cops, shooting at everything. This is, you know, after 9/11, this was something that entered my head. And I thought, you know, who's to stop anybody from doing that? And then it happened in New York City. I don't know if you remember that. Then It didn't happen. It wasn't ISIS related, but it happened again in Wisconsin, and now here we see this again. We see it too often, Jim. Do you think that the left is going to actually take these threats seriously, or will they continue to pander to the DEI crowd and the extreme left within their party and just, say it's not about radical Islamism. This is about, just a few bad apples, like Ilhan Omar. Some people did something.
Absolutely not. They're going to continue on the path that they're going. They have their religion, and it is to destroy America, and the American way. It's just the way it is.
You're 100% right. Jim, thanks for the call. Shout out to Naperville, Illinois, and thanks for streaming the show tonight on WMAL. And folks, anything you miss on the show, you can always check it out at richvaldez.com. That's Valdez with an S. Folks, we're coming right back with the rest of your calls and some humor from New Year's Eve. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, welcome back, familia. It's Rich Valdez. Open phones across America. We're having some great conversation tonight. Straight ahead, we've got Gordon Chang joining us. We're going to talk about what he wants to discuss, and of course, we're going to talk about some geopolitical topics. But before we do that, I want to end on a note of humor with comedian Whitney Cummings. She was on CNN's New Year's Eve show, and you've probably heard clips of this already, but come on, you haven't heard it here. And she's taken shots at several Democrats. I loved every second of it. Just imagine they bring this comedian on, and they're there outside with their headphones on, doing their stand-up interviews overlooking Times Square. Anderson Cooper, along with Andy, what's his name? Andy Cohen, right, from The Real Housewives, and who hosts all those reunions and whatnot. And they're there, and I think they were expecting her to be more favorable, and she comes in going straight for the jugular. Listen to this.
I'm playing bigger and bigger venues now. I thought being a mom would mean that less people will want to come see me. I'm now playing, like 3,000 seat theaters, awesome. Which is about the viewership of CNN these days.
Well,
not
nice.
this show, though.
Nice.
All eyes are on this show. Wow. The Democrats couldn't hold a primary because they were too busy holding a body upright. Are we still rolling? Am I off?
Go for it.
It was amazing that the pro-choice party didn't give their voters one when it came to the presidential candidate. Kamala was forced on us so hard you'd think she was patented by Pfizer or Moderna, whichever one's. Oh, God.
I actually thought all of those were funny. Good job, Whitney Cummings, and I'm not familiar with her work, so forgive me. But this was my introduction to her, and I thought, not too shabby, not too bad. Anyway, folks, we're going to continue to take your calls in the final segment of every hour. Open phones across America. The phone number for that, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ is the number. And, of course, I want to welcome the new affiliates. We have several new affiliates that are joining us tonight, so welcome to the party. Hope that you will join us if you're listening to this, and hopefully you're listening live. If you're on the East Coast, 9 p.m., if you're everywhere else, 10 p.m. Some places it's 7. If you're in Hawaii, it's 4 p.m. So anyway, it's a pleasure to be with you. Thanks for welcoming into your home or your car. And we're going to continue our late night national town hall conversation with my buddy Gordon Chang coming up straight ahead. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Your liberty-loving Latino amigo, happy to be here with you this Thursday night. We're live, we're national, and our phone number, if you want to join us on our late-night national town hall conversation, give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ, and we'll be getting to your calls towards the bottom of the hour. If you have any comments, questions, happy to get into that stuff. We're going to have some conversation on a lot of topics. We've had a lot of discussion so far about the failure of the FBI, the jihad on America, and so much more. I also want to talk about something that occurred while I was on my break and my holiday break, which is how tech companies are selling green cards to the highest bidder for the cheapest labor. So the question I want to ask is, do we have the talent in America or do we not? And I think the answer is yes and no, because it's a little bit complicated, right? In reality, we have an Indian caste system within the hiring and recruitment process, and American universities are colluding with tech companies because international students pay in cash. So there's a financial incentives for all these companies. But these graduates need jobs, and hence you have this collusion. So you also have, in my opinion, a problem with, I'm going to use the word laziness, right? Or you could say lackluster performance with a lot of young people in America. It's not like the young people of yesteryear, right? You go back a couple more generations, you have the greatest generation. All those guys were very young men when they served, and all the Rosie the Riveters out there were very young women. And we don't have that today, or at least not to the degree that we should. And I think there's a renaissance upon us, but we're not there just yet. You've got medical schools that limit their applications. And some of them are taking on more students, that's true. But by and large, we should be producing more physicians and more nurses, in my opinion, so we don't have to import them. Now, there's nothing wrong with importing talent if you need it, in my opinion. I think you if you need to, you do it. But you only do that when you need to do it. And what I'm saying is we shouldn't need to do it, right? The best engineers shouldn't come from other countries. They should come from the United States, in theory. So the question becomes, why is it that people from foreign countries are coming to the Georgia Techs, the NJITs, the Stevens Institutes, some of the best tech schools in America, and working here for a little bit, but maybe going out of the country, going to other places? And why is it that we're bringing in all this talent from overseas? Why aren't we producing that talent? These are the questions I think we need to be asking, because I don't think the problem is, do our kids have what it takes to become physicians or engineers or even nurses? I don't think that's the question. I think the answer is absolutely they do. They just might be ill-prepared. And there's also the question of national security in this H-1B visa debate, right? You've got Indian intelligence agencies that pressured Twitter in the past during the Jack Dorsey era to hire intelligence officers both at Twitter's India office and in the United States. That's, that was reported a while back. So if you have that type of influence that hopefully Elon Musk worked to resolve, you have a number of problems, right? A number of problems that create this H-1B visa debate. And it, not the least of which is breeding, right? Whatever happened to having children? We have an issue with having children. We don't have as many children. Our birth rate is down. Why are they so low? Why don't we have 6 kids anymore? Why don't more people care about preserving their culture, their bloodline, their family name, whatever? So I think this H-1B visa debate isn't necessarily about needing foreign workers or lacking American talent. I think it's about 3 things. A, reforming this corrupted caste system that offers visas to the highest bidder for the lowest wage over the most qualified candidate. B, creating a visa meritocracy. That's something we need to do that we don't currently have. And C, introducing the free market to our entire U.S. educational system, which currently favors cash-paying international students at the college level that need jobs when they graduate, and a public school system that doesn't focus on STEM from kindergarten. If you wait till kids are 11, 12, 13 to take an interest in science, technology, engineering, or math, you might miss the boat. They might be like me. They might end up in radio, right? If they end up in radio, we're all screwed. I can't build a bridge for the life of me. So I think we can have it both ways. I think we can have the best people and the best system where we can have a legit H-1B visa or whichever visa you want to do. If you want to eliminate that, want to call it something else. But eventually you want a system where you can bring in people who are the best of the best. I think that's fair and it makes sense. What's not fair is not giving Americans the opportunity to be the best of the best. That is, in my opinion, a huge problem and something that we need to get into. And it goes to the question of, is this the work of our adversaries? You know, for many years we talked about how China infiltrates the U.S. educational system with Confucius institutes that favor the Communist Chinese Party, CCP. So if that's happening at certain universities and colleges, who's to say it's not happening in other places? And of course it is. We've seen the influence that actual American Communist USA Party members have had on the union system in our country since the early 1900s, right? And in fact, many of them brag that they created this system in order to create something. I read an article on Marxist.org once that was a how-to on creating this, and they said you have to use the national minority. At the time, it was African Americans. In present day, it's people like me, brown guys, right? But Hispanics, Latinos. But back then, it was African Americans, and it said you go to the national minority, whomever it may be, and you give them a position of some sort of power, even if it's an insignificant one, a.k.a. the shop steward. Again, this is not my opinion. This is what they wrote. And that this would allow them to build bridges with the Communist Party within that was taking over, or infiltrating and subverting the American union system. Again, this is early 1900s. So I think that's pretty cool. I think it's very cool that they are so genius, right? I don't think it's cool that they're Marxists, and I hate commies. So that part's not cool. But this is how much they're thinking of it. This is how woven into the fabric of America and Americana the communists and the Marxists have become. So the question of foreign influence, it plays into a lot of things. And when you come full circle and you look at the news of the day and you say, oh my gosh, look at what's going on here. We've got ISIS threats in the United States, a jihad in the United States. There was a Jewish woman with her child in a baby carriage run over today in Queens, in Brooklyn, New York, I believe. Queens, New York, that was a shooting. 10 people, mass shooting in Queens, New York. You have 2 New Zealand police officers run over. I don't know if all of these incidents are related or not, all of these vehicle threats. But I've seen a trend over the last couple of days. And if I've seen one, maybe there is one, maybe there isn't. I don't know. We're going to get into that. And we're going to talk about the threat from China, the threat from ISIS, and so much more with our guest, Gordon Chang. Gordon Chang is a geopolitical analyst. You guys know him. He's been on my program many, many times. I've known him for several years. He's a great guy. And he really knows his stuff. He invests a lot of time. And there's several questions I've got for Gordon Chang, not the least of which is what's going on in other parts of the world, right? China's population isn't growing, just like ours isn't. Who crumbles first? That's my question. I'm hoping it's them. China targets Morocco right now. Why? Because they want to control the Mediterranean. I want to get his take on that. And, of course, how much influence does China have in South America, where they're sending us so many of their foot soldiers, right? Because remember, China hates us. So when you have guys setting women on fire, a couple blocks away on the subway, when you've got guys taking over the Roosevelt Hotel in Lincoln Center, Columbus Circle, does this all have to do with China? Is our broken immigration system all the result of a Chinese threat? Or is there more to it? Or am I making too much of it? Anyway, all of that and more, plus your calls, 833-4-VALDEZ, 833-482-5337. Don't go anywhere. It's Rich Valdez coming right back with Gordon Chang.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
I want to listen to you, Rich, all the time.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We're live tonight. I'm back from our holiday break. Yesterday, we had a year in review in addition to some of our best of programming, and thank you for sticking with us. I'm very happy to be back, and that's a special bonus. Been doing some of the show at 9 o'clock at night in some markets. And we will be replaying that stuff at midnight for some others in other markets. So we're literally going to be on the air from 9 p.m. all the way to 1 a.m. in different parts of the country, which is so cool. I'm thrilled about it. Plus your calls, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ, final segment of each hour, open phones across America. Now, I want to get into a little something because we were talking about China, and I saw this report by Greg Palcott of Fox News discussing how the World Health Organization is now asking very strong questions of China. I thought they were in China's pocket, but whether it's PR or the real deal, they're asking about COVID and why things didn't get reported the right way. Listen to this.
It's remarkable all these years later, and officials are still demanding to know how COVID-19 began. Remember, that led to over 7 million deaths worldwide. The first cluster of cases of viral pneumonia, soon to be known as COVID, was reported on this very day in Wuhan, China. At first, the thinking was it transferred from infected animals to humans at a market there, but a growing number of experts and officials pointed to a laboratory in Wuhan and asserted the disease was created and escaped from there. The one thing all seem to agree on is China is holding back. Even the World Health Organization, itself criticized for its handling of the pandemic, demanded Beijing come clean. China responded.
On the issue of tracing the source of the virus, China has shared the most data and research results and has made the greatest contribution to global tracing research.
A lot of folks don't agree with that, including a congressional subcommittee that spent 2 years and determined the lab leak theory was possible. Other scientists this year spoke up again for the natural transfer of disease. Remember, COVID-19 has now gone 50,000 cases worldwide. Just in a recent week, 500 deaths.
That again, Greg Palcott with Fox News with that report. And I don't know if it's fake, phony fraud, if it's PR, if it's the real deal, or is the World Health Organization finally waking up to ask China why things are going the way they did and why they didn't report the way they should have reported, et cetera, et cetera. But I want to get some reaction on that and many other topics from our guest. The esteemed Gordon Chang is with us. Check him out at Gordon G. Chang on Twitter. Gordon Chang, welcome back, sir.
Thank you so much, Rich.
Happy New Year to you.
And Happy New Year, yes.
So, Gordon, I want to dig into this. I want your reaction on this World Health Organization. We're on the 5-year anniversary of COVID, and this news came out just last night about the World Health Organization asking questions. Is this the real deal, or is this lip service?
My guess is that this is not the real deal. Remember, you had candidate Trump talking about the World Health Organization and President-elect Trump saying he's going to withdraw the United States from the WHO and from the pandemic treaty. And then the WHO comes out and asks for more information afterwards. That seems to me a little bit suspicious. Now, maybe it's not a coincidence, but I actually think that this is not the real deal.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Now, Gordon, there's a couple of questions that I want to follow up on that and add to with a couple of other things. Now, do you think any of this has to do with the population issue in China? Read a great piece by Gordon Chang in Newsweek about the end of China as a great power and their population collapse. And I want you to tell us about it and tell me if there's a correlation with their fake, phony, and fraudulent reporting.
Yeah, China reports 1.41 billion as population. Now, people argue about that. Some demographers say it's 100 million less. But whatever it is, Rich, by the turn of the century, 2100, China will be maybe as low as 330 million, maybe 500 million. We don't, of course, know, but the point is that China's going to probably lose something, at least 2/3 of its population over the next 8 decades. This will be
die, or are they going to leave?
They're not reproducing.
Wow.
And yes, there is outbound immigration, but when you're dealing with 1.41 billion people, outbound immigration is not going to be a substantial factor. The point here is that Chinese couples don't want to have children for various reasons. There's a certain amount of pessimism in Chinese society. That gloom is sort of pervading China right now. Also, as the society matures, they tend to become less fertile, including the United States. But China is undergoing a very rapid transformation in attitudes on fertility, faster than in any other country that we have seen.
Wow. And, in the United States, we also have a lowered birth rate. Do you think that we're looking at a same or a similar trajectory?
No. I mean, we could very well have a lowered total fertility rate. That's the average number of children per female who reaches childbearing age. But our TFR will be a reasonable one, and it's probably going to be the highest in the developed world. We will probably be a couple 100 million people more populous by the turn of the century, maybe 100 million people. But the point is, we're still going to grow. And that doesn't take into account inbound migration, which, of course, has been quite substantial, which we have a lot of. And also, when you talk about migrants, they have generally higher fertility rates than Americans who are already here.
Yeah.
So we'll be okay, even though we won't have a 2.1 TFR, which 2.1 is replacement. We'll be fine. China's TFR, by the way, is probably somewhere around 1. And it could very well drop to 0.8 or maybe even 0.7, according to some demographers.
Gordon Chang, I want to ask some more questions about what's going on in the Mediterranean with respect to China, what's going on in South America, as well as what's going on in Canada with ISIS. And we're probably going to pivot to that when we come back. Folks, we are on with Gordon Chang, our resident geopolitical expert and expert on Asia as well. And folks, don't go anywhere. We're coming right back. It's Rich Valdez, America at Night, and our guest, Gordon Chang.
Mr. Call Screener, who is a budding radio star, by the way. Richie Valdez is terrific.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
The voice of the great one. Thank you, sir. It's nice to hear those kind words. And for those of you who don't know, I spent a number of years as Mr. Call Screener. I was the associate producer of The Mark Levin Show and doubled as a radio host in New York City. And I am always grateful to everybody I met along the way, including our guest, Gordon Chang, who I met, who was a regular on the John Batchelor Show, another mentor of mine, a great man, a gentleman, and a scholar as well. And I saw this clip. It's a flashback clip about birth rates, about Sharia law, about the ultimate rise of Islamism, and some might say radical Islamism in the United States and in Canada. And this is from a Canadian news outlet, Rebel News. I want you to listen to this.
What happened to a gay couple in Palestine, sir?
What?
What would happen to a gay couple in Gaza?
Executed according to Islamic law. Islam doesn't endorse gayism. Islam doesn't endorse homosexuality.
Do you think that's good, sir? Do you think it's good for gays?
Islam doesn't approve of being gay.
I see. Okay, so would you like to see Sharia law in Canada replace Canadian law?
At some point it will. You know, because we have families, we are making babies. You're not. Your population is going down the slump, right? And by 2060, according to Pew Research Institute, your research, by 2060, Muslims will be the biggest religious group the world over. What are you going to do then? Actually, are you going to oppose Sharia even then?
Well, you know what? I'm very appreciative of the honesty. We don't usually get that. So you do support Sharia.
Just like you had a Muslim, a Western majority nation in a land of Native Americans, one day we can have a Muslim majority nation here in Canada.
One day we can have a Muslim majority nation here in Canada. Now, again, I'm not necessarily against this premise. I don't live in Canada. But I think it's an interesting topic. And as we were talking about birth rates in the previous segment with our guest, Gordon Chang, who is the author of Plant Red, China's Project to Destroy America. Gordon Chang, as we're in the wake of this jihadist attack in the United States, and you hear commentary like this, what's your initial reaction to that?
We have a problem. We have enemies in our country, of our country. And, some Muslims are just unalterably opposed to the freedoms that we enjoy and which form the fundamental core of our society. And Canada has the same problem as well. You've got returning ISIS fighters. One of them was just actually indicted a week or two ago, who had committed war crimes in Iraq and has now been prosecuted for crimes against humanity in Ontario. That's a good start, but the problem is that we have political establishments in both the United States and Canada that don't want to acknowledge the obvious, and that is we've got an ISIS problem.
We do, and in my opinion, there is a jihad on America where there was a mass killing of Americans with this running over in New Orleans, and then the shooting and the police, and just it really is it caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting to start the new year this way, even though there were talks about this. They were saying that they were planning these attacks from last year. I guess, you don't believe it till you see it, but here we are. What do you think happens now, Gordon Chang, with respect to this? How do we curtail this ISIS situation? And is ISIS truly a growing threat internationally, or is it just a growing threat here in the United States?
It is internationally, and what I expect in the U.S. to be more copycat attacks. Yesterday we had two terrorist attacks, the one in New Orleans and the other one in Las Vegas. We don't know if they're connected or not. On the surface, they don't seem to be, but there are some troubling links. But the point is, both of these were terrorist attacks, whether they were connected or not. And the expectation among national security professionals is we're going to see more of these. And the other thing is that in the Gulf Arab states, they expect more terrorist attacks in the United States from Islamic terrorists. And they believe that the attacks that are to come are going to be much more substantial and severe than the ones that we've had in the last few years.
Wow. Well, I want to, now that you brought that up, that's the next topic I wanted to discuss with you. And it is the Tesla Cybertruck that we learned that blew up outside of the Trump building. I got a quick report on this from Kevin I don't know how to say McMahill, I believe is how it's pronounced, Las Vegas police sheriff. Listen to this.
I would like to acknowledge a couple of things because I know what's going on in the social media world, and there are a number of things in this case that are similar to the attack in New Orleans. We do know that our subject here served in the military. In fact, he's a current member of the military. Both of the subjects served at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. What we do know about that is it's a very large military base, and we have no record that they served in the same unit or even at the same years at Fort Bragg, something that continues to remain under investigation. I also know that they both served in Afghanistan in 2009. We don't have any evidence that they were in the same province in Afghanistan, the same location, or the same unit. Again, something else that remains under investigation. And we also know, of course, that they both used the rental company Turo to rent their vehicles. As far as his military background, it's been confirmed by DOD that he was indeed in the United States Army. He was also a Green Beret operations sergeant who spent most of his time at Fort Carson, Colorado, and in Germany. He was on approved leave from Germany, where he was serving with the 10th Special Forces Group.
So this guy's a Green Beret, a Special Forces operator. And you mentioned a moment ago that we have a homegrown issue. We don't know if this guy was ISIS. We don't know anything. But what we do know, I mean, they were saying there was some pro-Ukrainian stuff, and maybe you could add more to that. But my thinking is, if this is true, and if this is really who it was, because, I mean, they said the guy's body was charred beyond recognition, but he happened to not burn his wallet and his passport and some other stuff, which seemed a little suspect. And the fact that he shot himself prior to the bomb going off also seems a little weird to me. But again, I've never been a suicide bomber, so I wouldn't know the first thing about it. But I do know that I don't know many soldiers in the United States Army that would do something like this, and I'm thinking maybe they are sympathetic to ISIS if they do something like this. What do you think, Gordon?
Yeah, it's hard for me to wrap my mind around that he was active duty Green Beret. And we're just going to have to learn more, Rich. I think this whole thing is suspicious. But we do know that Cybertruck was actually loaded with fireworks and was meant to explode. So This is an act of terrorism, regardless of who was the perpetrator. This is an act of terrorism. And it occurred within hours of the one in New Orleans. So we're probably going to see more acts like this in the United States. And this follows the open borders policy of the Biden administration. And it was not just terrorists coming across the southern border. They were also coming across the northern border. And Rich, the percentage of people on the terrorist watch list coming across the northern border was far in excess of the percentage of those coming across the southern border. We got a problem in Canada.
Now, Tom Homan comes on the scene, and hopefully we'll start to put an end to what's going on in the southern border. I haven't heard a lot of talk about the northern border. Have you?
Well, we have to be concerned about the northern border because in February of last year, 3 Chinese nationals were apprehended by U.S. Border Patrol as they were trying to sneak into Maine. What was fascinating about this was that there was a 4th Chinese national also arrested, but this guy, the 4th one, was in Maine, who was obviously there by prearrangement to help the other 3 come in. Now, Rich, if you're desperate to live in a free society, as many of the migrants are, you give yourself up to Border Patrol because you want to put yourself into the asylum system and you want all of the goodies from New York City. If you're coming in and you're trying to evade detection, as these 3 from Canada were, you're up to no good. We don't know exactly what they were. I mean, they could have been agents of the Chinese military, or they could have been, triads. But the point is, they were coming here for some no good purpose.
And Gordon, before we wrap, I wanted to, follow up on something I mentioned earlier about, as you're talking about these 3 Chinese locals that are here in the country. China's doing a lot internationally. Years ago, I remember they were trying to build a port in Puerto Rico to, fake island type of thing. They said it was going to be a water park, and it got shot down. But they're doing this all over, right? They're in the Mediterranean. They're in South America. Talk to us briefly about what's going on in Morocco and what does it look like in South America?
Well, Morocco is an interesting case because it controls the southern edge of the western mouth of the Mediterranean. A year or so ago, an Iranian general of the Revolutionary Guard bragged that they were going to close the Mediterranean. And people thought the guy was just nuts. But you got to remember that Iran has closed the eastern edge of the Mediterranean with the Houthis attacking shipping in the Red Sea.
They ship everything that passes by.
Everything that passes by. And we also know that Iran and China and Russia are deep into Algeria, which is next to Morocco. Morocco has been holding firm. It's actually the first country to diplomatically recognize the United States. It's been a Abraham Accord partner of the Trump administration. But the Chinese are investing a lot into Morocco, and we've got to be concerned, especially because Morocco and Algeria are now locked in a contest. We want to make sure that the good parties win, and that's Morocco. But, you know, if the bad parties win, that means they can close off the Med at both ends, east and west.
And what's the influence look like in South America? Is this just trying to gain influence with BRICS and some of the South American companies that mine gold, or is it bigger than that?
It's bigger than that. China is the second biggest trade partner of Latin America. If you take Mexico out of the equation, it is the biggest trade partner of Latin America. They've got 40 ports in the region. That's 40 potential Chinese naval bases. And they control both ends of the Panama Canal. And they can close the canal if they want to. And in a time of war, I'm sure that that's what they're going to try to do.
It's always about controlling the water and everything else, right? Belt and Road, they figured everything out. Unbelievable. Gordon Chang, the author of Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. Gordon, let everybody know how they can find a copy of the book and how they find you.
They find me through Twitter, X, at Gordon G. Chang, GORDONGCHANG. And I archive all my articles for free on my website, which is www.GORDONCHANG.com.
Outstanding. Gordon, I wish I had more time because I want to really have a very robust conversation with you about the H-1B visa debate and the issues with that, as well as the tariffs and how you think they're going to play out. Will it spark more of a trade war or actually equalize things, or a little bit of both? And so I'm going to let you know. I'm just giving you a heads up. We're going to be calling you again real soon.
Well, thank you so much, Rich. Have a good new year and stay safe, because this is going to be a very dangerous period.
Yeah, likewise. Same to you and your family. God bless.
Thanks, Rich.
All right, amigos, you bet. We will continue with your calls, your thoughts, your opinions on open phones across America. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Rich Valdez, who again will do a fine job, and I know you'll enjoy listening to it.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back, familia. We continue our conversation with you all, we the people, on open phones across America. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ is our phone number. And I'd like to speak with Ken in Lansing, Michigan, WILS. Ken, go for it.
Happy New Year, my Latino brother in justice and truth.
What's up, Ken? Happy New Year. Feliz Año Nuevo.
Oh, I appreciate that. Gracias, gracias. I didn't mean to trick your call screener, Rich, but I know you're a real current guy, so I want to speak this tonight, and then I'll talk to him about it in a couple of days. But terrorist attack in New Orleans was unbelievable. I seen an interview with the police commissioner of New Orleans, and she looked more like a bookworm at a librarian than she did a police commissioner of a city that's known for its violence and corruption. So in saying that, said in an interview, we had a plan for stuff like that, but they defeated us. So who's they? One guy defeated all the geniuses in the police department, and they're planning on how to protect people?
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know if it's a fair point, but it's a good one, right? And I guess that makes it a fair one because it's a good one. But I get where you're coming from, and I agree. And that was something I asked earlier when we were talking to Special Agent Baker from the FBI, and I was wondering what the vulnerabilities were. For example, the inauguration's coming up. I've been to inauguration in the past. When you go to D.C., when you get near the White House, these huge steel pillars just pop right out of the ground, and cars can't go through. Barricades just fly right up like a transformer. It's pretty cool. And again, I went to the inauguration in 2005, right, for Bush. So I can tell you, even back then, there was massive security. I can only imagine how much more it is now. We didn't even have drones back then. Now we have drones and all these other things. So, Ken, interesting point. What I can say is, if there's a gap, now we know, right? If you can fit a pickup truck on the sidewalk by running people over, then the police car in the middle of the street doesn't do it. And this is not slighting the police at all. I think they did a fantastic job with responding. But you're right. When she said we had a plan in place, but they beat us, the reality is, they did. And I'm not going to put this at the fault of the police commissioner or the police superintendent, Kirkpatrick. I'm putting this fault right where it goes on this man, the terrorist, Jabbar. But we always have to learn from these things, right? We have to learn and say, wow, what are we going to do next time? And maybe we do have to put those types of Washington, D.C. style barricades that pop up out of the ground so that you can't get through. And a lot of them are all over Manhattan as well. After 9/11, a lot of that stuff happened. And we still had incidents like that in Manhattan. So, there is, I guess, no perfect mousetrap, if you will, no silver bullet, but we can learn and we can move forward. Ken in Lansing, Michigan, thanks for the call, my brother, WILS. Folks, we come back. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. Open phones across America with me, Rich Valdez, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Let's go to Joplin, Missouri, KZRG, and check in with Karen. Everybody needs a Karen. Go for it.
I'm a good one. You had mentioned about they were like the body at Las Vegas, that it was burned beyond recognition.
Yes.
But they did find his ID and passport. And was he on, did you say he was on unauthorized leave or authorized?
No, he was on an authorized leave. I guess he took some vacation or whatever.
I'm wondering, this is kind of odd, but I don't know if maybe this is what you're alluding to, but when he's on leave, he's in Germany, so he's coming home. If he's been apprehended, he was probably killed and taken his ID. What's worse than having a foreigner come and do a terrorist bombing? Is worse.
At this point, I'll accept absolutely any story. Thanks, Karen. Folks, Rich Valdez coming right back. Don't go anywhere.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the program. Of course, we're taking your calls in a little bit on open phones across America. The number for that, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And hope everybody's doing well. We're back, we're live, we're here. Happy to be here Thursday night. Man, we've been having a lot of discussion tonight. We've had a great conversation with Gordon Chang about China and ISIS and so much more. We also, you are going to hear, if you haven't heard it already, you will hear Special Agent Tom Baker of the FBI, former special agent, who wrote a great book, by the way. He's going to tell us all about these terrorist attacks, mainly the one that happened in New Orleans, Louisiana, and what an epic fail that was, with the FBI saying, first, this is not terrorism, and then saying, this is terrorism. We're going to get into that. If you missed it, you'll get a chance to hear it, depending on what part of the country you're in. And, of course, the Las Vegas attack on the Trump hotel, that was bizarre. This guy gets roasted to pieces in the Cybertruck, and then all of a sudden they find his ID. Listen, it doesn't sound very good to me. I think there's holes in that story, but again, I've become such a cynic, so you can't. Maybe I'll take off my tinfoil hat and then reconsider. But all that aside, the media is what did this to us, right? The media has created this problem where people just don't trust the media. They don't believe what they hear because they have such a history of lying to us. Matter of fact, one of the chief legal people at CNN or CBS, one of those, Jan Crawford, she decided to slam the network, her own network, for underreporting Joe Biden's cognitive decline, saying this is probably one of the worst things we've seen in this year in review that she could think of, was how this went kind of swept under the carpet. And I'm thinking, we didn't sweep nothing. He has a whole name here, Joe El Baboso Biden, because he was stumbling, bumbling, and drooling like a real baboso. So I want you to hear Jan Crawford. Check this out.
One of the things we also do in the year-end correspondence roundtable is dig into what was undercovered or underreported. Jan?
Undercovered, underreported. That would be, to me, Joe Biden's obvious cognitive decline that became undeniable in the televised debate.
At the presidential debate with Donald Trump.
Unquestioned. And, it's starting to emerge now that his advisors kind of managed his limitations. It's been reported in the Wall Street Journal for 4 years. And yet he insisted that he could still run for president. We should have much more forcefully questioned whether he was fit for office for another 4 years, which could have led to a primary. For the Democrats. It could have changed the scope of the entire election. Yet, still, incredibly, we read in the Washington Post that his advisors are saying that he regrets that he dropped out of the race. That he thinks he could have beaten Trump. And I think that is either delusional.
Yeah, delusional. You could fill in the blank. Absolutely. I don't think neither one of them was going to win. But I will say, I think Biden maybe might have outperformed Kamala if he would have, done a little better. She did better in the debate versus Trump than he did. He pooped the bed. That was a disaster. But ultimately, she became a crap show. And I think in the longer run, he would have done better. Why? Because Joe Biden only knows how to do this. Come on, man. Like, he knows these things. She didn't have her little go-to phrases and the squinting of her eyes and the flashing of the big smile. She didn't have any of those moves. The only move she had was right, this laugh, this very famous laugh of hers. But ultimately didn't work. So, and I don't think it was ever going to work. I knew it wouldn't. I think if anybody's listened to this show for long enough knows I said, yes, give us Harris. Give us Harris. He'll beat her. Guaranteed he can beat her. She was that bad. Que mala eres. I didn't call her that for nothing. And I've been calling her that for years. So, anyway, that was that one. But I agree. The media has perpetrated a fraud on the American people. In the midst of our jihad, the FBI came out and said that this is not an act of terrorism. Now, that's not the media. That's the FBI. You know why? Because it's the left within the FBI. It's the left within the media. These radical leftists that exist in these different organizations, they're within the unions, they're within academia, they're within the public school classroom. They're everywhere. And they do what they do wherever they are. Bend the truth, fake the truth, break the truth, destroy the truth. This is exactly what they do. And this is why it's so important for us to have the truth. We've got to get to the truth in everything, not the least of which with these FBI press conferences. They've been incessant, right? We went from talking about drones all over New Jersey. There's drones everywhere. To now we're talking about terrorism and terrorist attacks all over America. How quickly things are from, right before Christmas to right after New Year's. What a change. Well, Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana, he's the funny one. He is also demanding the truth in this investigation of the FBI into the attack in Louisiana. And if not, he says he will raise fresh hell. Listen to this.
Here's what I want to ask from the federal government. Catch these people. Catch these people. And then tell the American people the truth. Now, I don't want you to tell us yet anything that's going to interfere with your investigation. And there are things that I've been told that I think are true that I'm not sharing with you today because it could interfere with their investigation. But after we get to the bottom of this, they need to tell the American people the truth. And the people of New Orleans the truth. And the people of America the truth. I think the mayor and the governor are very wise to postpone this ball game for 24 hours. There's just too much stuff we don't know, and it's just not worth it. But I guess my final point is, I will promise you this: I will, when it is appropriate and this investigation is complete, you will find out what happened and who was responsible. Or I will raise fresh hell. And I will chase those in the federal government who are responsible for telling us what happened, like they stole Christmas.
Like they stole Christmas. He's raising fresh hail, and good for him. And I think that's exactly what we have to do. We have to know what's going on. And I agree. It was prudent. Listen, we don't know all the facts, but we do know if you got people running into crowds, and if you don't have a plan in place to stop that from happening again at this stadium, somebody pretending they're tailgating and coming in with maybe like an RV or something bigger, you never know what could happen, right? So no Sugar Bowl, right? Is that the one it was, the Sugar Bowl? I guess that gets postponed. And I don't know if they're going to do it tomorrow or the next day. I saw a report that they were, then I saw a report that they weren't. Again, can't trust the media. It's almost like they're the weatherman now. Anyway. We're going to get to your calls, of course, open phones across America, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. We're going to talk a little bit about the H-1B visas. That was a huge hot topic, and then Trump said, I've always supported them, and that was it. It seemed to have ended that. Plus, the news quickly changed to cover all of these attacks that happened simultaneously on New Year's Day, which was yesterday. So that was, a lot of developing stories. Again, a woman earlier today with her child in New York City, run over, Jewish woman, run over seemingly intentionally. I'll try and get you some details on that during the break. There was another situation in New Zealand. Two police officers run over. One of them died. And this is, it seems to me like it's going on in a lot of places. Now, of course, one could make the argument a lot of these were accidents or these are isolated incidents, or you can't start stringing together every last vehicle attack and make it a trend. Well, maybe I can. Right? Who says I can't? You? Who are you? But I don't know that they are, and I don't know if they're all ISIS. But I do know when you pull out an ISIS flag or something that looks like an ISIS flag from a car that just ran over a bunch of people, killed them, killing 15 or 14 people, and then shooting at the police and then getting killed by the police, and then they try to revive the guy with CPR and he doesn't make it. When all that happens and you go in his car and he's got a flag that looks like ISIS, I don't know. I think you could say we found what appears to be terrorist-related paraphernalia in the car. We're going to investigate this as a potential terror situation, but we're not making any confirmations on that as of yet, right? I mean, I think that's safe to say. We're not going to say this is not a terrorist event. Why on earth would you say that, ma'am? And if you haven't heard that, listen to this. This is
not a terrorist event. What it is right now is their improvised explosive devices that was found, and we are working on confirming if it's a viable device or not.
Viable device, yeah. Meanwhile, there were no massive evacuations of anything, so it makes me think her little bomb threat was fake, phony, fraud. Anyway, I want to get into lots of other things, plus your calls, 833-482-5337. President Jimmy Carter died at 100 years old. We're going to have a conversation with a presidential historian coming up straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
So glad to be on your show, Rich. It's just an amazing broadcast that I hope the rest of America listens to every day.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. Rich Valdez keeping you company straight till 1 a.m. Eastern time, midnight in some areas. And I want to remind you that on the 29th of December, I think it was the 29th, President Jimmy Carter went to be with the Lord. I hope, I suppose. Carter died, and 100 years old, and that's always a big deal. You know, when a president dies, we like to talk about those things. I was never a fan of Jimmy Carter's, but he was a guest on this program many, many years ago, way before my time, even way before Jim Bohannon's time, but during Larry King's time, and we've got a clip of that interview. Listen to this.
Jeffersonville, Indiana, hello. I'm sorry, Toronto, hello.
Yes, President Carter, I'd like you to comment on something I heard President Ford mention in an interview recently. He said that a shift of 11,000 votes in two states, Hawaii and Ohio, would have made him president, and that when you took office in 77, the inflation rate was 4.8%, and when you left, it was 13.5%, and that the prime interest rate when you took office was 6.25%, and when you left, it was 21.5%. Could you comment on that? Thank you.
You have a good memory about figures. I don't recall those figures myself. As a matter of fact, most of our elections are very close. You have to remember that when Reagan was elected in 1980, he got less than 51% of the votes. And now the general presumption is, or belief is, that he got an overwhelming mandate from the people of his country. The major thing about inflation in 1980 was that oil prices had more than doubled in 12 months. And every nation on earth was suffering from inflation. The inflation rate in our country, as a matter of fact, was below that of Japan, France, Great Britain, and Germany. You might say that the president's responsible for worldwide inflation. Some people would agree with you.
That, of course, is former President Jimmy Carter speaking with Larry King back 1982-ish. And I want to get some reaction to that from Reagan biographer and presidential historian who interviewed President Carter when he was writing his book. Craig Shirley is with us. Craig Shirley, welcome back, sir.
Hi, Rich. How are you? Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you as well.
Thank you.
I don't have it in front of me, but please let everybody know the name of your book.
Oh, on the 1980 campaign, it was, I've written 11 books, but the 1980 campaign was Rendezvous with Destiny. And it is, I believe, the definitive book on the historic election between Ronald Reagan and Jimmy Carter. And I interviewed Jimmy Carter extensively for that book. Also, Walter Mondale, interviewed him as well.
Outstanding. Well, I think that's a great place to start. You heard his comments.
Yes.
It's so reminiscent, honestly. Again, they're talking about back in 1977 in that clip, and I was born in 78. So it just gives you so much context of what I don't have. But what I do have is Joe Biden. And the similarities between Carter and Biden, for me, from a historical perspective, are just uncanny. And I think Biden might be worse than Carter. But I want you to tell us what this experience was like, and then we could talk about the political stuff.
The experience of interviewing Jimmy Carter?
Sure.
Yeah, it was. He was not Mr. Warm and Fuzzy, but he was very, very helpful. He was frank with me about identifying his strengths and weaknesses and Reagan's strengths and weaknesses. But what's interesting is that it was pretty formal and correct. I asked the questions, he answered them, and then I mentioned him. I said, Mr. President, I saw a recent article about you and Mrs. Carter fly fishing in New Zealand, and all of a sudden you could hear his voice brightened, and he became very animated and wanted to talk about fly fishing, and so we talked about that for a few minutes, and then after the interview, I sent him a box of lures of flies as a thank you for the interview. So I hope he put them to good use. But he was an avid fisherman; he loved to fish. So he was. Walter Mondale was unbelievably charming, just a wonderful man to talk to. Was very voluble, was very, very eloquent, was very, very, frank about the strengths and weaknesses of the ticket, and told me a number of things that hadn't seen the light of day, including that he had threatened to resign the vice presidency in 1979 when Carter was planning to give the now infamous Malay speech. It wasn't called the Malay speech, of course, but he was so opposed to it that he threatened to resign. And so that was new news that hadn't seen the light of day before.
And the what was it? Was it called the misery meter?
Yeah, the misery index. That's right. Yeah, it was a combination of inflation and unemployment. Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Does it surprise you that Biden did not get his own misery index or something similar?
Well, he has a pretty partisan media on his side, so any misery index that would have emerged, the media was a lot more objective in 1976 and 1980 than they are today. The left wing media has become far more partisan and far. I mean, look at the discussion now going on in this country about Biden's infirmities and his obvious mental decline, and how the media covered it up. They worked hand in hand with the Biden White House to actually cover up the fact that the incipient mental decline in Joe Biden. But there is a big difference between the two. You said before, and you're absolutely right, that Biden was similar to Carter in that, and the reason they were similar is they both pursued the same.
Yeah, the same horrible policies economically. Craig Shirley, I want to thank you for being here. Folks, make sure you check out his latest book, The Appealing Intellectual Conservatism of Ronald Reagan. Craig Shirley, Happy New Year, and thanks for being here, brother. God bless.
Thank you. Take care.
You bet. All right, folks, we're coming right back. More to come straight ahead, plus your calls, 833-4-VALDEZ.
Now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, welcome back. Rich Valdez live with you till midnight, 1 o'clock. Depends on where you're listening and where in the country you're located. And for those of you in some parts of the country, you'll get to hear what happened at 9 o'clock again at midnight, which is really cool. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And we had a very good conversation with former FBI agent on what's going on with that stuff. But I want to switch gears a little bit because I saw something that really caught my eye, and it's a report about a restaurant that's been forced to close over what? A gender discrimination lawsuit, DEI. And the transgender movement really has put a death blow, if you will, on this restaurant because they had a promotion called Ladies' Night. Listen to this.
A restaurant is forced to close after a gender discrimination lawsuit over its weekly ladies' night.
A frivolous lawsuit that took us down, and it's these ambulance-chasing lawyers.
A family-run Peruvian eatery is serving its final meal on New Year's Eve after it was slammed for offering discounted drinks to women once a week.
Promoting one gender does not discriminate against the other gender.
The owner says the legal battle has drained tens of thousands of dollars from them and forced them to shut down after nearly a decade in business.
Restaurants, it's already the profit margins are razor thin, and stuff like this does not help business at all.
The owner also criticized the lawsuit, saying it was frivolous and was initiated by opportunistic lawyers rather than local residents.
When I go to other states, I see ladies' night everywhere.
Poor guy had to shut down his restaurant. They were there for a very long time, and here they are with no restaurant, all in the name of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, this movement, that movement. And it makes me wonder, let's say I had a business, I offered a law enforcement discount. Hey, look, if you're a member of law enforcement, show us your TIN or whatever, and hey, we got a discount for you. I don't see anything wrong with that. I also don't see anything wrong with saying, hey, it's on Wednesdays, it's ladies' night, and ladies get half-price drinks. What is wrong with that? This isn't the government doing it. This is a private industry. I don't get it. I guess they're making the case of discrimination, but are we not, just tell them we're going to do a men's night? My bad. Guys' night out. I don't know. And can the government mandate this? I don't think it should. Right? What if you want to give little kids a discount for something? Kids under 18 eat free. Kids under 18 pay this much. Haven't you seen that stuff? I have. Is that now age discrimination? I mean, this whole thing is out of control. I can't believe that maybe this thing had no merit, but because it had momentum and because they had, money, they could keep it in court. And I would say that, shame on the judge for allowing that to happen. And I don't know all of the merits of the case, but it seems like a judge could have said, hey, look, this is frivolous and, we're done here. And based on the American rule, you have to pay for your frivolity. But that didn't happen, so it's a shame that happened. But I'd like your thoughts on that. Should restaurants be sued for ladies' night? Here's the number, 833-482-5337-833-4-Valdez. I want to know where you're calling from in your part of the world. Do people have a right to sue the restaurant? Of course you do, but should we accept that as a society that, ladies' night is now shunned upon, frowned upon? Anyway, you got the number, 833-4-Valdez. Let's go to the phones. Let's go to our buddy Doc in Wilmington, Delaware. Doc, I know you have a comment about Trump and the intelligence organizations, but I want to first ask you, should restaurants be forced to close if they can't defend themselves legally over such a crazy lawsuit?
No. And I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
You are much more the legal beagle than I am. You're a legal mind of brilliant stature. You've been an insider in the Republican Party. All I am is a foot soldier and a volunteer in Delaware here. I want to ask you a question, Rich. I want you to get on your high horse. You have a lot of influence in this country, and get together with some of your people in the think tank circle in Washington, D.C., and take this trash to the federal level, the federal courts. Let's go to the Supreme Court with a case on this stuff once and for all and get this crap thrown out nationwide.
That's not a bad idea, and we've had some really good lawyer guests on this program, one of them from something called the Pacific Legal Foundation, and they take these kinds of cases. Maybe I'll call him and ask him what he thinks about this, because I think it's insane that this guy is out of business now after, I don't know, he was there for a decade or 2 decades or whatever it was, 15 years, that, you have to close up shop because you offered ladies' night. I mean, this just sounds like predatory lawsuits. Anyway, how was your New Year's, Doc?
Great. How was yours?
Wonderful. Thank God.
It's good to hear your voice again, my brother. Good to hear your voice again.
Amen to that. Thank you. I appreciate it. Now, tell me about your comment about Trump and the intel agencies.
Well, here's what I think. Ever since 9/11 and the reshuffle under George W. Bush II, which was a total disaster, the CIA has been relegated in foreign intelligence to a secondary role to the FBI. The FBI has now achieved J. Edgar Hoover's dream of being almost the Gestapo of American law enforcement, in that it controls foreign and domestic counterintelligence, which was not the thoughts of the people that founded the intelligence agencies after World War II under President Harry S. Truman. National Security Act of 1947. Okay, it created it created the CIA, it created the various branches of the military, and it created the National Security Council and its staff under the presidents. Now then, I think Kash Patel is dead wrong in moving the FBI outside of Washington, D.C. for this reason. The FBI's role, as I see it, is, and I'll emphasize this, domestic intelligence and counterintelligence, counterterrorism. We should never move the FBI out of either the Washington, D.C. or its emphasis on New York City around the UN. The UN is a hotbed of spies. D.C. has embassies. It's a hotbed of spies. You got to be in with the foxes to guard the chickens, my man. That's job one. Job two, abroad, the CIA must regain under President Trump its preeminent role in foreign intelligence gathering outside our shores and counterintelligence outside our shores, which it had prior to George W. Bush. Those are my thoughts.
All right. Well, I'll share this with you. I think that you will appreciate the conversation we're going to have in the next hour, right? And some folks have heard it already, but with Thomas J. Baker. He's a former FBI agent. He's the author of a book called The Fall of the FBI, How a Once Great Agency Became a Threat to Democracy. And in the book, what he writes about is how the FBI changed during the time of Director Mueller, like you said, during George W. Bush. And it went from being a law enforcement and investigatory body in the country to become a counterintelligence agency, which it was not meant to be. That wasn't what it was necessarily when J. Edgar Hoover was around, although he abused his authority a little bit and whatnot when he wasn't cross-dressing. So ultimately what happens here is because they've become the domestic CIA, we have the problems that come with the CIA. The CIA goes abroad and starts wars and, does all sorts of things in addition to spying. And now you've got the FBI here that I would allege, based on the information I've seen, that started this phony coup attempt on January 6th that now admits that they had, I think, 26 informants on the ground, won't admit if they were dressed as MAGA people impersonating. These are all very serious questions, and this is what the FBI has been doing domestically. So I think when Kash Patel says we've got to get the FBI the heck out of Dodge, I think that's why, because they need to end the power structure that they have of people that live in Arlington and all that area there that surrounds the swamp. You want to drain the swamp, take away their supply of food, right? Cash and a job. Once you do that, then I think you're able to rebuild. So I think that's the thinking. It'll probably make its way back to D.C. once they're able to, drown out the swamp monsters. Right now, they're trying to take the fish out of water until they stop flapping. I think that's the idea. Anyway, Doc, hopefully you'll enjoy that conversation. We're going to talk about the terrorist attacks and whatnot. I think in your part of the country, you haven't heard it yet, so you'll hear it in the midnight hour. But I thank you. I wish you a happy new year, and I'm coming right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
National Voter Registration Act, we call it the Motor Voter Law, allows people to sign up to vote when they get a driver's license. If an individual only asserts or simply states that they are a citizen, they don't have to prove it. They can register that person to vote in a federal election. And you see, states are currently prohibited, believe it or not, the states are prohibited from asking someone to prove that they're a citizen. The federal voter registration form just has a check-a-box, and if you do that, you're good. The states can't allow it. Well, we think that's a serious problem. And so what we're going to do is the House Republicans are introducing a bill that will require proof of citizenship to vote. It seems like common sense. I'm sure all of us would agree. We only want U.S. citizens to vote in U.S. elections.
That is Speaker Mike Johnson, who is facing the hour of reckoning tomorrow. He's been endorsed by President Trump for Speaker of the House, but the big vote is mañana. Now, you'll remember last year, this went on for days on end with Kevin McCarthy. He couldn't win, then he finally won, and then Matt Gaetz had the rules changed, and 7 people, along with Gaetz, said, you broke the rules that you agreed to, you're out of here. And they got rid of him. So will that happen to Johnson? Everybody's out there. You've got Thomas Massie saying under no circumstance will he vote for him. And others saying that they're still looking at it. And I think he's going to win anyway, even though they're down one vote with Matt Gaetz. I think it should be a pretty clear-cut thing. This is not last year, right? This is not going into an election year. This is, we now have a Republican president. We have a Senate majority and a House majority. Now, despite the overall grand scheme of things, I don't want to imagine a situation where we have multiple rounds of voting. But if that's what democracy brings us, that's what it brings us. But my hope is that we will have a pretty straightforward vote for Johnson tomorrow, because really nobody else is positioned to do it. Nobody else has really thrown their hat into the ring. Nobody else has the support of Trump. So I think that's how it's going to go. But you never know. I mean, look at how things went with Gaetz and his attorney general nomination, right? So things can get tricky. We shall see. This is D.C., the swamp. Now, in other news, Joe El Baboso Biden has issued an award, like the highest, second highest civilian honor, to Liz Cheney and Benny Thompson. And why? Because of their tremendous work in the January 6th witch hunt. Biden to honor 2 January 6th committee panelists, Liz Cheney and Benny Thompson, with the highest award, second highest civilian award, which is called the Presidential Citizens Medal. Ain't that something? I want to get your thoughts on all of this stuff. Let's see. Where do we go? Somebody had a question about that. Are they gone now? Okay. We should go to the person who's been on hold the longest. And that will be... Nothing works here. Let's go to Robert, Charleston, South Carolina, WTMA.
Hello. You asked before, you were talking about the guys who were not appropriate for our society because they were antisocial. In other words, they were, blowing up people, and in case in driving cars down roads with pedestrian walkways in order to kill them, those kinds of things. And that's because that's what they do. And I was thinking to myself, when England had a problem with criminals, it basically sent them to Australia and New Zealand because it was far away and it was risky, and most people just didn't want to go and do that. Well, we have a similar problem today. We need people eventually we're going to need people to settle Mars. And I was thinking maybe people of that kind who just simply won't tolerate people who don't have their opinion, we could use them to settle Mars if they want to go. It would be voluntary for them rather than sit in prison. They could take that chance.
I see. So what you're saying is, you say, listen, you're going to get a 2-year, 3-year prison sentence for what you've done, or 10 years, or whatever it is, life, or we can send you to Mars, and you get to pick.
Right. Exactly. What do you think?
Well, I don't know what's going on Mars. I heard Musk talking about it the other day, or tweeting about it. I don't know much about Mars. I don't know if the Martians are tough people. I don't know if the weather's good for humans. I mean, so much I don't know. But I do know that we should not give the option to people that have been convicted of crimes. If they were in front of a jury of their peers and they've been afforded their appeal process, you do what the judge imposes, right? If the sentence calls for this. Now, I understand in some cases you can make a deal, right? I've heard of people not going to jail and going to like a boot camp or almost like a labor camp where they, literally breaking rocks instead of sitting in a cell all day. I guess if you can, break rocks and get a little time off for that exchange, that might be an option. So it might be an option. But what I don't know is, what if, Robert, Mars is like Miami and there's palm trees and nice sand and beautiful women and just it's a great scene and a great vibe and great music. Then is it really punishment? That's the part I don't know. But interesting thought nonetheless. Robert in Charleston, South Carolina, big shout out to WTMA. And folks, when we come back, more on the jihad in America, spying, China, immigration, and so much more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, we continue. And listen, we've got a lot of people here. There's a lot of people. We got Boise, Idaho, KBOI, Bowling Green, Kentucky, WKCT, KDKA, Pennsylvania, San Jose, California, KVTA, Saratoga, New York, WGDJ, Cumberland, Maryland, WCBC, and a lot here to discuss. Let me see who I have not spoken to. Line 4, Jacob in San Jose, KVTA. Go right ahead.
Yes, happy New Year to everybody. Rich, say your guest, he maybe has already covered this. Maybe you have too. But in the first few years of the when Vice President Biden was in office, he began to make deals, apparently getting 10%, allegedly, but his son was the one who was doing all the footwork, especially in China. Before 2012. In 2012, there was a failure to stand up for mutual defense with the Philippines over China stealing, taking over, invading their islands. So the question has never been answered. Why did they do that and not get any kind of blowback from President Obama?
Well, obviously, because President Obama put him in place to do that, right? Nobody really operates, nobody goes into business by themselves in Washington. Everybody's cutting somebody in on something somewhere, whether it's politically or financially. At least that's my assessment of it. I wish I could get into more of that, but I think you're right. They got away with murder. Now, amigos, I'm sorry I can't get to every call. I do want to encourage you guys to start calling in from 9 p.m. because we've got a lot to discuss. And I want to talk to you at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, midnight. Anyway, up next, you're going to hear from FBI agent Tom Baker. And hasta la próxima. Take care, good night, and God bless you, America. I'm Rich Valdez.